As the war between the Israel Defense Forces and Hezbollah continues in Lebanon, comes word from the Jewish state that Russian arms have now been found in the bunkers of the terrorist group. To chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who joins us from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, Israel is quite concerned with this recent find since these weapons appear to be more modern and numerous than what was originally believed to be possessed by the Islamic Republic-backed terrorist group.
Right. And it just shows the very tangled web of rogue nations of the world uniting as they have over the last 4 years, helping each other out, not only in skirting sanctions, not only in really doing away with the isolationism that has been created by the West, but really bringing each other back into being more relevant and also helping with the various wars. So we have the Islamic Republic of Iran selling weapons to Russia, Russia helping the Islamic Republic, buying oil. Again, the circle continues. And now with Israel finding Russian-made weapons, we know that there is more collaboration between these entities. And to what end, right? To what end will Iran's regime stop putting its money, its resources into terrorism, into its terror proxies, to continue really harassing and terrorizing the small state of Israel, the state the size of New Jersey, the only Jewish state in the world, one of the only democratic nations of the Middle East, our ally in the Middle East, but yet it finds itself encircled by these terror proxies that are funded by Iran's regime that is now getting help, obviously, from China, Venezuela, Russia, and other rogue nations.
The Biden administration, Lisa, is allegedly urging Senate Democrats to oppose pending legislation and seeks to block about $20 billion in military aid to Israel. Now, supporters of the restrictions say that Jerusalem has not really done enough to reduce civilian casualties in Gaza. Since the start of the war in the region in October of last year, Congress has granted Israel close to $18 billion in assistance.
Right. And that assistance is because Israel is fighting a war for the rest of the world. It is fighting a war against radical terrorism, which would kill any single one of us on a good day. What the world is very much caught up on, and this is just promoted by the various acronymed organizations like the UN, by the media, of course. We're seeing so many different media outlets, besides for yours, of course, that are pushing this myth that Israel is causing a genocide. Now, of course, there are casualties. We don't want any casualties on any side. But we also have experts that tell us that they've been on the ground and that Israel is doing everything in its power, not only to remove innocent civilians from harm's way, to make these attacks completely pinpointed, as pinpointed as possible, I should say. But there's always going to be collateral damage. There's always going to be human shields. In the case of Hamas and Hezbollah, creating these terror tunnels and keeping hostages in places where there are civilians, actually keeping hostages with civilian families. And that brings them all into the fray as well. But this is a myth that just continues on and on. Just for some numbers, because we want to have just statistical evidence of all of this, the population, both in Gaza and the West Bank, has increased exponentially over the last few decades. And not only that, since October 7th. So imagine that, even with all the casualties, there is a bump up in the population. So that is the opposite of a genocide. That is an increase in population. And I will always end with this. I will always have this sentiment. If we truly care about the Palestinian people, as many of us do, we would like to see them rid themselves of any terror elements within their society so that they could actually have a chance. So the Palestinian people, as many of them have in a very brave way, should stand up against Hamas. They should stand up against Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They should stand up against terrorism and radicalism in their schools, in their homes, in their mosques, wherever they find it, so that they actually have a chance to grow, have their children grow, and move away from this radicalism.
The leadership in Qatar, Lisa, says the Hamas office in Doha has not been closed, but it's inactive, and the whereabouts of the leadership of the terrorist group is, quote, uncertain at this time.
Yes, so there were conflicting reports saying that, yes, Qataris asked Hamas to leave. I mean, this was perhaps in reaction to a Trump win, to say, well, there will be, obviously there's more deterrence coming from the West. They're not going to stand for this. Obviously, a loss of the war for Hamas and closing their doors. I'm assuming they don't have neon lights outside to say open or have it be off. So we have no way of knowing besides believing them that they have not shut down operations. Other reports were saying that they have opened up shop now in Turkey. The truth is, they're moving throughout the Middle East. They have operatives everywhere, hiding in many places because they are cowardly and won't stand up and live in the places where they are ruling. They are billionaires, Hal. So when we see reports of Palestinian people starving, that they should demand answers from their leadership. They have many billionaires among their leadership, and of course, they are using and abusing the aid and the money that comes in, and not passing it along to the Palestinian people. We saw that with the trucks that were looted. We see that with the aid that is hoarded and not given to the people, the Palestinian people. So here we have another he said, whether or not they have an actual storefront in Qatar or in Turkey or both, we don't know.
And Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson says Hamas officials are no longer interested in negotiating a ceasefire in Gaza. Lisa, is that because perhaps many of the hostages are no longer alive?
Right. So, I mean, when were they truly ever really interested in a ceasefire? If they were, we would have had one already. We're already 1 year past the war. And of course, over 100 hostages still being held, which is the most mind boggling part. These are innocent civilians from all over the world, by the way, Hal. There are Americans among them as well. And by the reports that I am seeing from the Office of the Ministry in Israel, they believe that 50, about half, are still alive, and about half have perished in the hands of Hamas. Obviously, a single life is worth saving, and Israel does believe that. The one thing I will say is, despite the reports that we see here in the West, the one thing that all Israelis, left, right, and center, even those who are against Bibi, those who stand with Bibi Netanyahu himself, they are all they have a priority in this war to get the hostages home, and they will do whatever it takes. So every time they've gone back to the negotiating table, it hasn't worked out. The terrorists make huge demands that just cannot be met. And in this case, there was another ceasefire demand this week, and I think part of the small font that the Hezbollah and Hamas did not agree to was that if Israel finds itself in a precarious situation, they have the right to defend themselves, and that just was a no-go for them. So, I mean, you can understand what the Israelis are up against in fighting these terror proxies.
Absolutely. And Iran has promised to cap its stock of near weapons-grade nuclear fuel on the condition, Lisa, that no censure resolution will be issued next week of the UN nuclear watchdog. This coming from a Reuters report.
Yes, it's an interesting time for the Iran regime to be making concessions. This is them trying to play nice when we know that they have never held to any of the stipulations by the watchdog group. This is the UN's arm that controls nuclear proliferation. So the Iran regime has shut off its cameras, more than 27 cameras. The centrifuges keep spinning. They have enriched uranium above the allotted percentage amount. And here we are. And they are now making this last hour effort to please the inspectors, not to issue censure. But just this morning, we saw the EU issue fresh sanctions against Iran's regime. And we know the incoming administration here in the United States has already said that they will pursue a policy of maximum pressure once again on the Iran's regime, which does mean maximum pressure and sanctions on the important sectors of Iran's regime, including its nuclear weapons and weapons proliferation in general.
And speaking of U.S. government officials, Lisa, after the White House gave the go-ahead, Ukrainian armed forces launched projectiles from a U.S.-supplied Army tactical missile system battery deeper into Russia's territory than previously permitted. Will this help turn the tide of the war?
I mean, who knows? I don't think this is going to do it, but it will absolutely escalate things, and that's what everyone is afraid of. This is a very dangerous way to escalate the war, A, and B, to close out the Biden administration's basically their legacy in this war. I don't know what what was for, but Ukraine obviously didn't waste any time taking the United States up on the offer. and Russia didn't waste any time threatening them back. So now we are waiting here, wondering if this will lead to a huge escalation. Many people are calling it the beginnings of World War III. Obviously, when nuclear arms are being threatened, and that option is on the table for Putin, who is a madman in many ways, that obviously still is something that we should be fearful of. At the same time, the Biden administration is doubling down on its support of Ukraine, giving more money and weapons to Ukraine in the final weeks of their presidency.
Yeah, Lisa, let's talk about what government officials are doing in the United States. There are reports surfacing that the Pentagon will send Ukraine around $275 million in new weapons as the Biden administration rushes to do as much as it can to help Kyiv fight back against Russia before Trump takes office in January.
Yeah, if 275 million was going to do the trick, I think it would have done it a long time ago. And I know, I am not pro Putin, and I'm not suggesting that, the Ukrainians just, surrender and let this go. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. And at this point, where's the diplomacy in all of this? What has the Biden administration done to de-escalate rather than escalate to a point where the Ukrainians still cannot overcome this challenge? So if it's $275 million of taxpayer money, and you're only escalating the war, you're only setting the Ukrainians further back, you're creating more casualties. And what happens then? Putin is now able to flex his muscles more, make more threats, and advance. Ultimately, they will advance because they have also now they have the justification of and the fear that the Ukrainians are shooting further and further into Russia. So um, it's a dangerous move, and I think one that will not have the outcomes that the Biden White House is thinking that it will have or praying that it will have. I think it's a dangerous way to close out this presidency. And at the same time, I do wonder what will happen once that diplomacy or a different type of foreign policy comes into play January 20th, when Trump comes into office, and he does have a relationship with Putin, and perhaps does have something in mind in terms of offering Putin an off ramp to end this very, very senseless war.
Yeah, praying it comes to an end very soon. Lisa, here's some news that kind of hits close to home for you. Los Angeles City Council voted unanimously to codify a sanctuary city ordinance into the municipal law that'll protect illegal immigrants in your city from being deported by President-elect Donald Trump.
Anytime there's a chance to just step all over democracy, leave it to Los Angeles to be the first to take that order. Yes. Look, we don't even know what's going to happen. We don't know. We know that Trump does want to make this country safer, wants to create a more legalized immigration system. He has said he will deport a certain number of migrants, but we don't know what that means. Is he going after the gangs? Is he going after certain individuals that have come up on threat lists? Which we've covered that at the foreign desk. I mean, how many thousands of people have come up on questionable lists, whether it's a terror list or it's most wanted list, or they belong to gangs from their country of origin. Look, it's too soon to say, but to say that we will absolutely not abide by the law or by the president of the United States sets a very dangerous precedent. It's anti-American, it's anti-democracy, and of course, very, very LA. So we shall see what will happen.
I don't know if you've seen this, but it's making the rounds on social media right now. It's gone viral. The map of the different states, the blue versus red states, and the states that didn't require any photo ID or any ID whatsoever that went to the Democrats. I have to investigate further to find the legitimacy behind this. Have you seen that as well?
I have, and I think it's important right now for a lot of Americans who find themselves on the left to just study what has happened, to study the trends, and not to say things like most Americans want to leave the country, or I saw a celebrity say something like, I'm leaving the country and I feel bad for most Americans who can't. Well, most Americans, if we're defining the word most as more than half, voted for the man who's coming into office. So I mean, it's such an ignorant and out of touch, entitled and privileged comment. If the Democrats as a party, and I'm talking about even the ones who find themselves more center, don't learn from this referendum, don't learn from this wake up call, this will continue to happen from local elections all the way up to the presidency. And that is because average Americans, wherever they find themselves, we're talking about women groups, we're talking about minority groups, we're talking about gays, we're talking about African Americans, we're talking about Mexican Americans. There's so many other us, a minority or smaller interest groups that voted for President Trump. And there's a reason for that. And we need to get to the bottom of it. What is it that Americans crave? They want common sense politics. They want a better economy. They want safe borders. They want their children to be safe. They don't want indoctrination in schools. And these are the things that really we have to come together as a country and unite around. I mean, what we see in the media is a fringe group of California and New York Democrats who want to control the narrative, and it's so passe. I mean, it is completely passe. The rest of most Americans, to quote the celebrities, don't want that, and they don't think like that, and that's not what they want for their children. And it's time that we listen and we come to a consensus on what most people want.
U.S. political reporter and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from the City of Angels.
Thank you so much for having me.